You know, we alternate the chairmanship of Jalkar each year from the Senate to the House. Last year, Senator Reagan was our chair, so this year we would look for a House member, and I would nominate Representative McGuire to that position,
Second.
who served as vice chair last year. It's been moved and seconded to nominate Representative McGuire as the chair. This is when you don't show up, you get elected to things. So, are there any other nominations for chair? Not seeing any, I'll close nominations. All those in favor of Rosa McGuire as nominated as chair, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Carol, you've been nominated as chair. Congratulations. All right. So we'll move into the business. The first order of business will be the consent calendar. Are there any items wishing to be removed from the consent calendar?
Hearing none.
Oh, 1 second.
Not that I know of. We will need to approve the minutes also.
Oh, thank you very much. So seeing no items being removed, I'd entertain a motion to approve the
So
consent
moved.
agenda. It's been moved by Senator Ward, seconded by Representative Schmidt. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The consent agenda has been adopted. I'm trying to find the minutes. The minutes, next up are the minutes of, I'm trying to remember what date that was. We had our last meeting, November 17th.
Move to approve.
It's been moved by Representative Schmidt to approve the minutes of November 17th. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Senator Ward. Any discussions on the minutes as written and presented? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And one abstention. Sure, two abstentions. Minutes are approved. Mike, next order of business is?
First item on the regular
Yeah.
calendar, I believe.
So next up is the Officer Professional Licensure 22-8 on recreational therapists.
Mr. Vice Chair, this is an interim rule, and it had quite a number of comments. So would you prefer that I go through each one individually and then pass it over to the agency, or we do one comment, have the agency respond, and go?
Why don't you go through your list, and then the agency can respond to your list.
Sure, absolutely. So the first comment appears on page 2 of the rule, page 8 of the packet. There's a website link on there that doesn't work, and it doesn't spell out the URL, so that was an unclear comment, as this is a interim rule and that needs to be easily accessible by the public. There is a note to Jalkar on page 3 of the rule, page 9 of the packet, just talking about the bill that resulted in this interim rule. House Bill 1446 dissolved the Recreational Therapy Governing Board, which was effective on July 19th, 2022, and made it an advisory board under the OPLC, which ties into the note to Jalkar on the last page, just informing the committee that at this time the Recreational Governing Board had existing rules when this statute went into effect, and those rules are still effective at this time. As was discussed at the last meeting for interim rule 7, there is now a question of who has the authority to repeal those rules, which is an ongoing problem, as there are 2 other boards that were under this bill that had the same thing occur. Moving on to the next substantive comment, there's an edit unclear comment on page 3 of the rules. It mentions the retention schedule established pursuant to the statute, but the statute does not lay out the retention schedule. It gives the OPLC the authority to create that schedule, and there's no cite to the retention schedule in that particular rule, and it does not lay out the schedule in that rule. There's a legislative intent comment on page 10 saying the executive director may grant initial licenses, but it doesn't state what the criteria are for which licenses will be granted or how the licenses will be viewed to see which ones will be granted, which could result in oral rulemaking in violation of RSA 541A 22(1). There's another unclear comment on page 10, once again having to do with, having to do with the board's website and the fee amount that's listed in the rule. The fee amount listed in the rule is different than what's in the board's website. A screenshot of the board's website is attached in the final, in the interim rule packet. And the same comment appears on page 19, as there's another rule, another fee amount cited that's different from what's on the board's website. There's an edit unclear comment on page 5 where the form submitted to OLS only lists a space for the length of experience when it states that the licensee must have the same or has met the same criteria as was previously needed. So it's unclear what criteria is being considered, as the form only has that one space for the length of experience. Unclear on page 12. The rule says when the application becomes available online, but the OPLC website says that paper applications are no longer accepted. So there is a discrepancy on there as well. And once again, there is a screenshot of the OPLC's website in the packet. There's an unclear comment on page 10 that says to pay the fee in PLC 1001 for recreational therapists, but as of now, that particular rule does not exist. There's no mention of fees for recreational therapists in the PLC 1000s, and there's also no mention of the fee on the website. There's an unclear comment on page 13 where the rule uses the language that the licensees will be notified when the website is under contract to notify so that the licensees might start using the website as opposed to submitting things directly to the OPLC. That language is unclear because saying under contract doesn't mean that the site is operational, and there could be a amount of time between when something becomes under contract to when it is actually operational. There's another unclear comment on page 13. The rule as worded says until an online system becomes available, the OPLC will use this particular auditing process, but it does not specify what the auditing process will be after the system becomes online. On page 19 as well, there's another unclear comment which states for which disciplinary action can be taken. Once again, it does not establish criteria of when the disciplinary action will be taken, and also does not cite the rules that deal with disciplinary action. So what disciplinary action could potentially be taken, and so once again that leaves room for oral rulemaking, which could be in violation of RSA 541A22(1). Thank you.
Got all that, Courtney?
I did. Thank you, Senator Ling, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Lindsay Corney. I'm the Executive Director of OPLC. So just before I address specific comments, this board was converted to an advisory board last session because we had quorum issues that I believe that the prior governing board had not met for about a year and a half. And so there were issues with the ability to obviously regulate, but also to license applicants. So what we did in terms of moving forward with interim rules is we largely took what was existing so that we could get them in the PLC rules. And we are now proceeding with drafting the regular rulemaking process, which will include an advanced public comment period in early January. So to the extent that there are substantive changes that need to happen, as well as comments that we should respond to that OLS has provided, we would suggest that that would be the best time to do it. In terms of specific comments, I guess I'll start with the retention schedule issue. The retention schedules are filed generally with the state archives. That has been approved. We're happy to post that on our website, but that is typically done outside of the rulemaking process. And we did just get approval from the Secretary of State's office regarding our retention schedule. In terms of the fee issues, there are different fees currently located on our website because the fees have yet to be changed. So if we do get approval, if these rules are approved, we will have an effective date that post-dates this meeting, and we'll make sure that the website lines up appropriately with whatever the fees are. In terms of the, let's see, temporary license fee issue, the PLC 1001.07 was actually on consent today. So I do believe that that issue has been resolved and that the committee has approved a change of a fee from $100 to $25. And again, we'll adjust that on the website as needed. In terms of discipline, we would suggest that our PLC 200s are the appropriate regulatory authority for disciplinary issues. We're not ever going to be able to fully capture every instance in which disciplinary action is warranted, but I think that the procedures are well laid out in PLC 200s, and we can certainly respond more clearly with regular rulemaking to OLS comments. And then I think I had a couple of others. I apologize. Some of the website link stuff we can either make that change. The links worked for us when we tried it, so I apologize that they didn't work. Our intent was not to incorporate a website by reference. So we can certainly, when we proceed to regular rulemaking, make sure that the link is working as necessary. And then in terms of on page 4, there was a question about licensees who essentially were blanketed in, grandfathered in, whatever phrase you want to use it, at the time that recreational therapy licensure was required. It basically stated that the board may issue licenses to individuals who had already been practicing with certain credentials, if they had received a credential prior to, I think it was 2007. Practically, I don't think this is an issue anymore because licensure is now required. So they would have to go through the regular process. And we would suggest that we probably eliminate this as we proceed with regular rulemaking, but we elected to keep it in to avoid making any substantive changes until the regular rulemaking process, and we can receive more comments from the public. I think those are the comments that I would generally offer, but I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to put you on the spot. There are a lot of new members. And so understanding the difference between, a conditional rule, an interim rule, final rule, and understanding what that means to the members and what we're approving. Could you kind of run through that for the members?
I will. This is an interim rule. If adopted, it would only be in effect for 180 days. In the meantime, the agency would go through regular rulemaking to replace the interim rule. It's often been the committee's practice in the case of an interim rule that they do as suggested by Director Courtney. And that there be a recommendation or understanding by the committee when they approve the rule that the issues that are in there raised by committee staff would be addressed during the regular rulemaking. However, if the committee feels that some of these issues are so important that they need to be addressed immediately, the committee can preliminarily object.
Thank you. So, Ms. Courtney, the edits that they have made, you're acceptable with the edits and comments that and we could adopt the rule with the edits inclusive that we talked about?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions from committee members for Director Courtney?
Hearing none, Mr. Chairman, I will move to approve with the recommendation that was referenced.
It's been moved to approve the interim rules with the edits suggested by staff. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Senator Ward. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the interim rules adopted as edited. Next up is the Board of Natural Scientists, Rule 2277.
So this is a conditional approval, which means they did a final approval. Sorry, they did a final proposal and I reviewed it and they came back with more edits. So you'll be voting on the conditional approval text. There's actually only one issue with this rule, and that is that on page 2 of the conditional approval, there's one section of rules that has been expired since 2019. Those rules are about the explanation of a rule after it's been adopted. And so the JLCAR may have questions about how they were doing that during the expiration period.
Thank you. Just 1 second. So generally, the idea is agencies aren't allowed to enforce rules once rules have expired. So the standard question is, how have you been enforcing the rule, or have there been any enforcement actions on the rule after it expired?
Good morning. I'm Tina Kelly. I'm the program specialist at the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification. And with regard to this particular rule, there would be two other guidance that would be accepted because it's an explanation after adoption of a rule. It would be both 91A and for any procedural Justice 800s we would rely on. And I am not sure, I haven't seen anything where this was even an issue.
Any further questions from the committee? And staff, we're good with there's no further edits needed on this.
No, the rule other than that is fine.
Great. I accept be looking for a motion to approve the conditional.
So moved.
It's been moved for to approve the conditional rule. Is there a second? Second. It's been seconded by Representative Lynn. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and your rule is adopted. Thank you. Next up is the Department of Safety Vehicle Registration Rules 2284. Staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So the only substantive comments on this particular rule had to do with the forms. Just so the committee is aware, forms are considered rules under the statute and therefore have to go through the rulemaking process. So the issue with the forms that were incorporated by reference in this rule is that some of them had revision dates that did not correspond with rulemaking. So OLS did ask for the department for an explanation, and after submitting the final packet, did receive some additional information from the department. So with regard to the comment on page 7 of the rule, it was explained that this is actually a new form that is being adopted with these particular rules. So that substantive comment would actually be converted to an editorial comment that the date just needs to correspond for when the rules are approved by this committee and adopted. With regard to the substantive comments on page 13 and 17, those two, I'm sorry, page 17 and page 67 of the packet, which would be page 61 of the rules. Those two forms was explained that they had very minor editorial changes, which are allowed outside of the rulemaking process, as they weren't substantive and did not affect anything to do with the information being provided. So those comments have been removed, and the final form on page 13 of the rules, that one does remain a substantive comment, as the information provided shows that this particular form was substantially revised outside of the rulemaking process. And therefore, if the committee has any questions for the department, we wanted to leave that on the regular agenda for you to address.
Good morning.
I think that comment is with regards to the request for a vanity plate. Can you hear me?
Yes,
My name's Marta Montagnani from the Department of Safety. The issue with the vanity plate, we went through rulemaking back in 2019 and adopted rules to reflect that there are you could get vanity plates for decals and motorcycle. So it's number 16, 17, and 18. So the form was changed to reflect that you could check those boxes off as well. And that has an effective date of January of 20, which was a month after the rules were adopted. The form was not incorporated by reference in the rules, so that's the only substantive comment, substantive change to that rule, and then, of course, editorially, the change in director.
So that is correct. The particular section that incorporates that form by reference was not included in those November rules, which is why the form was technically amended outside the rulemaking process.
Is the form in here, the new form, that one that was adopted, 120 for reference, is that in here as far as the agency, we've seen it?
A copy of that form is included in the packet, yes.
Any further comments by committee? So back, we can adopt the form, understanding that they need to deal with this form that has to either come back to rulemaking so they can adopt it. Is that correct?
At this time, if you adopt or approve these particular rules and the agency adopts them, the effective date of the form would change to the date of now, yes. The only reason that was made a substantive comment is just so the committee is aware that the agency did make those changes outside the rulemaking process.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion for the agency or questions for the agency? I'd entertain a motion to approve. It's been moved by Representative Lynn. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Senator Ward. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the rule as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the rule's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Next up is 2299, Department of Health and Human Services on radiation safety requirements for wireline service operators and subsurface tracer studies.
Yes, sir. I'm actually going to take both of these two together. The next one is also another RAD rule. So the agency is requesting a postponement to the January meeting. You still need to vote on when that January meeting will take place, but the agency would like to request a postponement. And in order to do so, you will need to request a waiver of your deadline.
Thank you. So again, for the new members, so agencies, we have a certain deadline in order to act on rules. If we need to, if for some reason the agency in this case needs an extension to be able to work on it, we have to waive that rule so that they have time to work on it and come back after the normal deadline. So I'd entertain a motion to waive rules and postpone items 2299 and 100.
So moved.
It's been moved by Representative Leon, seconded by Representative Schmidt. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. It's been postponed, and the needed rules have been waived for timeline. Next up is the Board of Licensed Dietitians, item number 22131.
Yes, sir. There's just one comment to bring to your attention, and that's on page 1 of the conditional approval request or page 2 of the linked PDF, depending on which one you're looking at. Like I said, the agency did file a conditional approval request. The comment, although I've indicated it's an unclear comment, it really should be an informational note to the committee. The legislature has been working to remove fee authority from the boards and to place that fee authority with the executive director of the OPLC. And here, I just wanted to make sure that the committee was aware, even though there is a reference here to a renewal fee in another rule, that the fee authority doesn't lie with the board. It is, in fact, with the executive director. This board does have fine authority, but not fee authority. Again, and this is the only comment, and it is an informational comment to the committee.
Thank you. Before I go to the agency, in case anybody has questions, I'll let you know that I served on SB 330's study committee, which is about OPLC licensure and process. I do have a bill in to do cleanup. We have, at one point, we granted OPLC director the right to set fees, but we also have throughout the statutes on all these different boards, places where the board also has authority to set fees. We have it in two different places. I do have a LSR submitted to clean up all that language and go along with the most current law we passed, which was to move fee setting authority into OPLC directly, not the board. And the board is advisory in nature when it comes to fee setting. So there is there is an LSR presented based on Senate Bill 330 Study Commission. So that being said, this will be corrected in the law. So
Mr. Chairman, I think the members of the JELCAR should be co-sponsors of that, of your LSR, so it's clear that it's something the JELCAR supports.
sure, I'll make sure I add that. I haven't got language
Thank
yet.
you.
Once I get it, because I'm sure it's going to be very extensive considering the number of places we talk about boards and fees and OPLC. So, any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the Rule 22-131.
So moved.
It's been moved to approve. Is there a second? Second by Representative Lynn. Motion by Representative Schmidt. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the rule is adopted. Thank you.
All right, the next one is Board of Psychologists 22-149. And this one is just an incorporation by reference statement issue because there's a new ethics principle document that has come out in 2016. The agency decided that they want to go ahead and go back to the board and get that document and update that date. And so they're asking for a postponement, and JELCAR will have to waive their deadline, and then they can come back around in January and that'll be all fixed.
Thank you. So I'd entertain a motion to postpone and waive timeline requirements.
So moved.
It's been moved by Representative Schmidt, seconded by Representative Lynn to postpone and waive timeline requirements on Rule 22-149. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and it's been postponed and timelines waived. Next up is the Mechanical Licensure Board, 22-171 on administrative obligations.
Okay, this one is a little confusing. So there's nothing wrong with the rule. I have no comments on the rule. The issue was that back when the agency filed their notice to go in the register, there was a mix-up in the FIS. So the FIS that was published went to a completely different rule and said completely different things. And we realized it, and I'm not sure what happened with the communication between myself and the agency, but for some reason we didn't get it fixed right at the beginning, and so it went out like that. And then we it was obvious that it was a mistake and that just the wrong one had been filed. And so we asked for the correct one. We were immediately given the correct one, which is what you see here in the meeting packet. But it is a different FIS, so there's a question of whether there was full notice for when this went to the public originally. So you have some options. You can either just approve it and move on, or you can kind of a little outside of 541A, but you could request that the agency have another public hearing, so that we would notice them with the correct FIS. They would have another public hearing, and then they would come back for approval. This has happened. I've seen it happen once with an agency that had a lot of people come to a public hearing, and some people didn't feel like they had gotten enough time to say what they wanted to say at the hearing. And that was, I believe it was DES or Fish and Game. And so they went back after the JELCAR meeting, had another hearing, and then came back to JELCAR for approval after they had done that. It's really up to the committee.
Any more?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I've spoken extensively with Tina Kelly about this. The initial fiscal impact statement that was included was from a rule earlier this year by the same board that indicated there was an indeterminable but minor cost to the state, but otherwise that was it. The correct FIS indicates no costs at all, which is the case with the rules. Tina also indicated that no one showed at the public hearing, no one supplied written comment So it did not appear that anyone was misled or harmed by this. As Christina said, you can approve the rule. You could request they have another public hearing, or you could request that they put special notice in the rulemaking register to indicate what happened and include a copy of the correct FIS.
Representatives Whitley or Senator?
It seems to me the latter might make sense as a middle ground. So putting the correction in the, rather than holding a whole new hearing, to just put that change in the register, I think makes a lot of sense.
I agree with Senator Whitley entirely.
So is that a motion, Senator?
Yeah.
It's
Second.
been moved to
Second.
approve the rule and to make a note in the register that the incorrect FIS and post the corrected FIS in the register. Is there a second to that? It's been seconded by Representative Lynn. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and it's been adopted. You guys are getting all the interesting rules, right? So you're getting every type: final, conditional, interim. So next up is an emergency rule. And Mike, can you just let the again the new members explain what emergency rule, what this means to the board?
Certainly. An emergency rule is allowed for two reasons. There's imminent peril to public health or safety, or there's going to be a substantial economic cost to the state or citizens if the rule, because there is not time for regular rulemaking to address the important issue. An example would be if there's an outbreak of red tide, then an agency would do an emergency rule to, stop clamming and other shellfish. We sometimes find that there are staff finds that there does not appear to be an emergency, and we tell that to the committee. An emergency rule is unusual in that once the agency writes it and brings it to our office, it is immediately effective. There is no public hearing. There is no other notice. We do publish it in the rulemaking register. In this instance, I would prefer that the agency talk about the substance of the emergency rule.
Thank you. So just so board members understand, we actually don't have a vote on this, right? So the reality is it's informational only. They have the right to make the emergency rule based on 541A. The only thing we could talk about is potentially the fact whether we think that the emergency truly exists or not, and comment. Right?
Right. If the committee believes that there is no emergency, or that there may be an issue, but it would be better suited to regular rulemaking, then you can petition the agency pursuant to 541A4 to repeal the rule.
Good morning, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Allison Radmay. I am the administrator of the Administrative Rules Unit for the Department of Health and Human Services. And with me, I have...
My name is Beth Margison, and I'm the General Counsel and Legislative Liaison for the Division for Children, Youth, and Families. And we also have with us Eve Allen, who is the head of the Policy Unit, whose unit actually does our rulemaking. Yes. So I'm actually probably going to defer a lot to Eve because she has the subject matter expertise on this. However, the rule is needed because we are, I guess, if I could just see that sheet, if you could give it to me. Okay. So right now, the New Hampshire foster families are not required to receive the COVID-19 vaccine in order to be licensed. And the reason that we are doing this is that the Division of Public Health has not mandated COVID vaccines in the state of New Hampshire. And also it's necessary for us to retain our foster families. The department's immunization requirements for children in foster care have typically aligned with the federal licensing standards for the United States Department of Health and Human Services following guidance from the Centers for Disease Control. So the CDC recently updated its list of recommended immunizations to include the COVID-19 vaccine. When we, as a department, learned of this change, we moved swiftly to amend our administrative rules to ensure that the COVID-19 vaccine would not be required for foster care licensing. And so in order for our, at this point, our administrative rules are not in alignment, so we need to do this carve out to ensure that we are in alignment with the rest of the rules. And so we are doing this on an emergency basis at this time. And then when the rule is, we intend to make the rule permanent, I guess in June, when we open up the rule for further revisions.
So these changes will be put into place permanently prior to the expiration of the rule, and internally the department is working on that draft to start getting that filed.
And I would just ask Eve, because I'm new to this, if there's anything that she thinks needs to be added. You can come up here if you would like.
I think you spoke to the situation very well. Our licensing standards follow the federal requirements, and they issued new federal requirements in 2019, right before COVID was here. And those requirements required immunizations to be present for household members. That came out in February 2019. Then we had COVID in 2020. The rule became effective in 2020, but that was still prior to the vaccine existence. Since then, the entities that are named in the federal standards for vaccine requirements have amended, one of the three entities amended their vaccines to include the vaccine to prevent COVID. And we're trying to make sure that that change that was not included in 2020, that has now become effective, does not impact our foster families. So we're trying to be proactive to make sure that our rules that require vaccines to be in alignment with those three entities have this exception, so we're not requiring families inadvertently to have a COVID vaccine, but that's not the intent.
All right, let me see if I can take all of that and summarize it in something that we can all understand. So the short version is the federal government changed their rules to require COVID. I know that we have a law, because I wrote it, that says that you can't require the COVID vaccine for participation in certain things. And so what we're doing is creating this carve out, because even though the federal standard says you have to have it, we're saying the state standard is that you don't. And that's what this rule does.
Correct. And so we took this original rule in June of 2020. So actually May 2020. So I think it was the first GelCar back since COVID started. And at that time, there were comments and questions on what if there becomes, or there is a vaccine for COVID, how do we address that? And we did tell the committee at that time that we would enter rulemaking immediately to exempt the foster families from that requirement. So we tried to make good on that.
Thank you. Discussion, Representative Whitley. Or Senator Whitley, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thanks for taking my question. So I'm just trying to think through, have you spoken to whoever you need to speak with at the federal government to make sure we're not dinged on anything?
I have reached out to a representative with the Children's Bureau to make sure they're aware that we're making this deviation from the model standards to have an exception. They were aware, and they said that we can hold on putting our official 4E plan amendment in until the official rulemaking goes in, but they were agreeable to us making this exception as long as we can validate the reason behind it, and that is the concern about the impact on families and loss of foster homes.
Thank you.
Representative Lipp.
I guess I want to make sure I'm saying that. I thought that your counsel had said when she was speaking of the minister that it was only a recommendation from the federal government that you have COVID-19, or is it a vaccine, or is it required?
The language says that we're required to be in compliance with the National Model Licensing Standards, and the National Model Licensing Standards says that household members will be in compliance with all recommended vaccinations. So it's that dance of the language where they're requiring you to meet all recommendations. So it's both terms, unfortunately, are part of the sentence. It just makes it strange.
So I guess I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying. I guess my only question then is, you seem to be okay with having a state rule that is in conflict with the federal rule as you've interpreted it. And I guess my question is that okay? Or, you know, are we likely to have the feds come in and say, you're in violation of, and therefore you lose some funding or whatever?
We file a Title IV state plan with our federal partners. Our current Title IV state plan is approved. In that plan, there's a page specific to the National Model Foster Care Licensing Standards that allows us to articulate any deviations from the standards. And as long as we can give a valid reason as to what reason we have to deviate that's not putting any safety concern for children or families, then the feds will review that and they'll sign off on it. And until they, when we put the page in and they review it, if they decline it, then becomes the compliance issue that they've told us that we're not in compliance, that we need to rectify it. At this point in time, we've been transparent with them that we're looking at this deviation, and they have not expressed any concerns for us being out of compliance.
Thank you.
Representative Lynn also say this is similar to what we do with Medicaid expansion, right? We have some exemptions and differences with Medicaid expansion that we file with the federal government and say, we're going to adopt Medicaid expansion, but we have some deviations. So it's not an uncommon practice for our state to have a deviation from a federal program and notify the feds to that we do. And then they'll decide whether or not our deviation is too deviated. And so thank you very much, because nothing to vote on really.
Thank you.
Mike, what else we have?
As other business, I've handed out a draft tentative meeting schedule for 2023. We should vote on that. By statute, you would be meeting on Friday, January 20th anyways, because the law requires that the committee meet the third Friday of each month unless the committee adjusts that. Currently, it's been the committee's practice to meet on Fridays during the session, so January through June, because you're all otherwise busy on Thursdays. During the second half of the year, when you're out of session, the meetings are on Thursdays, so you don't have to come in on a Friday in the middle of the summer.
I assume, Mike, we've looked through these dates to make sure we have no holidays in any of these dates that we'll have to deal with later.
We did it several times with different calendars. I do believe that this one's right, but if it's not, we can fix it.
Great.
So I'll move to approve.
So it's been moved by Representative Schmidt to approve the calendar as written and presented. Is there a second? Second by Senator Ward. Sorry, I'll get used to that a little bit. Further discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just a little note for my participation. I do have a conflict with the Children's Oversight Commission. Not every single date is in conflict, but that begins at 10. So there are times that an alternate might be need to be seated on an individual basis. I could do an hour here and then leave for the Oversight Commission. So I just wanted to let you know about that.
Great. That's why we have alternates. Any further discussion? Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. My only question would be around the December 21st. I expect I'd probably be traveling with family already. If seating an alternate's acceptable, that's wonderful, but I just wanted to raise that now since I'm already planning to miss that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion. It's been moved and seconded to approve the JALCAR meeting dates. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the calendar's adopted. Attorney Morrell.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm sure the new members are a little bit confused after this and wonder what's going on. We do plan to do rulemaking training. It should take about an hour. We can do that at the end of the January meeting unless it's a huge agenda and takes a long time and the committee would rather defer that. We can also do individual training in our office. We can also send out materials and perhaps a video to help the committee members.
Thank you. So let's plan on doing it at the end of the 20th. Let's also invite all the alternates so they show up and
Yes.
so they can get the training as well on the 20th. And so we'll have all the full-time member, all the regular members and all the alternates present at the meeting on the 20th.
We will do that.
Thank you. Further discussion. Senator Chandler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if this is the appropriate time, but I'm wondering if it's the custom and practice or a requirement for those not in attendance at a prior meeting to abstain from voting or approving the minutes.
We've allowed it in the past. So we don't have a rule one way or another. They're free to vote. They're free not to vote because the
Okay.
potential
Thank
is
you.
they could listen to the audio and the video if they wanted to, and know what happened at the meeting, and so therefore feel comfortable voting. So
Okay, thank you.
Just for informational for the committee members, on our website, which is under Gen Court, there's administrative rules. And under that, there are links to RSA 541A, which is the Administrative Procedures Act. There is also a copy of the rulemaking manual. That's a rather long document. It's a requirement that agencies follow in their drafting, and it also lays out the process to go through a rulemaking procedure. It is compliance with it is required by RSA 541A8. We make a lot of editorial comments. You may have noticed on that. We don't bring those to the committee unless we think there's going to be, the agency is going to be unwilling to make the change and it would create a problem. There is also contained on the website the committee's own rules, which are important, and we're in the midst of revising both the manual and the committee's rules to bring them up to date. When they're done, we will bring them forward to you for a vote.
great. Any further discussions or items? If not, this meeting is adjourned.
Nicely done. Yeah, really. Did you get briefed on this meeting?
No.
No, because you were on top of it. It's great. I know you're a detailed guy, so thank you. You picked the right person to do it. Not the